Over the years, there's been an increase for the need for change. Whether global warming, economic struggle, issues within a community, or social struggle, the call for change has been declared by people on all different levels of the social spectrum. However, some question the effectiveness of these calls. If a figure like Kylie Jenner or Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson were to call for change, it would most likely be met with eager fans willing to help. Could we say the same for the average Joe? This leaves the question, to what extent is the average person as capable of inspiring change as more influential figures? As seen throughout history, several now historical figures have inspired change throughout their community while maintaining an average life. Some through actions, others through words. For example, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a letter from Birmingham jail to address opinionated accusations against him and what his organization stood for. Similarly, in The Sword Blown in the Wind, Dylan gives his thoughts on obtaining change. He talks about how the answer is within reach, you just have to stray from the path enough to grab it. The first lens is the political and historical lens, with the perspectives of MLK and Rosa Parks. Though they're now well-known figures, when they inspired change, they were just as average as anyone else. For example, in King's letter from Birmingham jail, he addresses opinionated claims made against him by clergymen of Birmingham. King says, several months ago, the affiliate here in Birmingham asked us to be on call to engage in a nonviolent direct action program if such were deemed necessary. We readily consented, and when the hour came, we lived up to our promise. So I, along with several members of my staff, am here because I was invited here. I am here because I have organizational ties here. In the excerpt, King explains his purpose for being in Birmingham to the clergymen. He justifies that he is there in Birmingham with his organization to not only do peaceful, non-violent protests, but to not disturb Birmingham and to inspire change in Birmingham to resolve the issue. Similarly, Rosa Parks also inspired people to stand up for what they believe in. In the article, Montgomery Bus Boycott, the author explains the events that happened. This is best shown when he states, in 1955, civil rights workers in Montgomery began to plan for a citywide bus boycott. To implement their plan, they needed a model citizen to defy segregationist policy and to get arrested for that action. On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks, a 43-year-old seamstress and civil rights worker, fulfilled that role. This talks about the beginnings of the boycott. It says the civil rights workers needed an average person to start the boycott, and without any talking to, Rosa Parks was the person to get arrested and defy the segregationist policy. I would also like to mention that it says she was a seamstress. Seamstresses were paid minimum wage, which in the graph here, 1955 it said, which is about right here. Minimum wage was about 75 cents, which means she was not at all very wealthy. She had no fame. Other than being a civil rights worker herself, she was just an average person. Then the next lens is the socio-cultural lens with the perspectives of the Rodney King rioters and Swami Vivekananda. The Rodney King rioters were, after being chased down a highway, Rodney King was pulled over and arrested by 6 white officers. He was then beaten several times by the officers who used unnecessary force. And though he was beaten severely and severely injured, nothing was done to the officers. 2 of them got their jobs revoked, and the others got away scot-free. One example. It talks about this is a interview from the scene of the riots when it was beginning. It is the rioters on the scene of the courthouse after they had announced that they were guilty, not guilty, what their punishments would be. The interviewer asks this man who could not give his name why he's there and why he thinks other people are there. He says, I think most of them, like myself, came down as individuals. I think we just decided that we were not going to sit at home like couch potatoes and just watch. We have to be heard. This shows that he thinks that most of the people there are individual, average people just like him who want to be heard and want to make change. Not only was the change inspired by these individual people, he also talks later in the interview about how more and more people are showing up, which was inspired by them showing up to the courthouse in the first place. The next lens is a social cultural lens with a one cultural change would be Swami Vivekananda, an Indian priest, as seen right here. Going to temples, he inspired great change throughout his time by going to temples and encouraging others to speak about their religious beliefs. He was even invited to attend the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago as a representative of Hinduism in 1893. Here you can see Virchard Gandhi, and Anagarika Dharmapala, Swami Vivekananda, and G. Bonnet Mari. Even though he inspired a lot of change, Swami was considered average. As explained in his biography, born Narendranath Dutta in Calcutta, Vivekananda studied philosophy at the Scottish Churches College of Kolkata and became a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, the head priest of the Dakshineswar Temple. So overall, Swami was considerably average, aside from being a priest. The next lens is the artistic and philosophical lens, with the perspectives of Bob Dylan and Gandhi. In the case of Bob Dylan, one of his most famous songs, "Blowing in the Wind," talks about change and how it's within reach for everyone. This is most apparent in the verse. Yes, and how many years can a mountain exist before it's washed to the sea? Yes, and how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blown in the wind. The answer is blown in the wind. He asked the audience to inspire change and believes that they would inspire change better than he could, which he is inspired. Though he was famous at the time, he inspires the people to inspire the change, but they're the ones that he asked to inspire the other change. Similarly, in Gandhi's To Every Englishman in India, he explains how he brought change to India without fame and encourages other people to inspire this change as well. This is expressed in the quote, "I ask you to believe me when I tell you that my cooperation was not based on the fear of the punishment provided by your laws or any other selfish motives. It is free and voluntary cooperation based on the belief that the sum total of the British government was for the benefit of India." Gandhi gives the idea that his belief in the Englishman was all he needed to inspire change, while also he encouraged others to inspire this change. However, there are strong arguments against these claims. The rioters burned buildings, stole and looted, blocked the streets of LA, and left the city in shambles. No change to the verdict was made. But that isn't the change. The change was the minds of the people who were involved in the riots. They inspired other people to join them and come down to riot against it in hopes of making a change. Though they may not have changed the verdict, they did change the minds of other people around them. In conclusion, average people are just as capable as more influential figures of inspiring change. Some implications of this are how long it will take to inspire the change. Because of lack of fame, it may take more time for them because their message may not be heard as fast, and so it will take longer for them to get their message out and for everyone to know that they're trying to inspire the change. And we're excited.
Okay, a couple questions for you, Eli. The first one is, what information did you need that you weren't able to find or locate, and how did you go about trying to find that information?
I really needed data and evidence so for example, I would have loved to find some data on what's the word I'm looking for it? On how well it worked for famous people to inspire change versus how well it worked for people that weren't as famous to inspire change. I really would have liked to find like a graph showing like the difference and like how they inspire the change in people and the effectiveness of it.
And how did you go about trying to find that?
I looked through several sources that were peer-reviewed and some that weren't. Ended up not being able to find any graphs or anything like that, but I did try to make the best use I could of the sources, like the Rosa Parks or Bob Dylan, the stimulus sources.
Okay, and then your second question is, what might be the real world implications or consequences of your findings, and then what are the implications to our community?
The implications to our community is that there aren't famous figures in our community, so it's going to be harder for us to inspire change. Like, it may take more time, but we are just as capable of inspiring it. And even in smaller communities, it will probably be harder for them to get their message out to the world for it to be broadly heard.